Well, hey everyone, how you doing today? Well, we're coming with a special video for you today. We're in the neighborhood where Ingo Swann used to live until a short time ago when he passed over in January of this year, 2013. And I wanted to make this little video for you because I was fortunate enough to be able to have a conversation with him in January, just a few days before that happened, and I was able to ask him about why he thought remote viewing worked, what some of the mechanisms were, and he brought up some very interesting information that was new to me, and I just felt I should really share it with you. I talked to him on the phone a few times, and when I finally went over there, we talked about all sorts of RV history and things that were going on with it and science topics, and you know, he was just a great guy, and you could talk to him about anything because he was so well versed in so many subjects. So one of the subjects that I wanted to bring up with Ingo when I met with him was, sorry for the noise here, it's a little noisy, this neighborhood. One of the things I wanted to bring up with him was the statement that Russell Targ had made at one of the previous International Remote Viewing Association meetings in Henderson, Nevada last year in 2012. You know, Russell Targ is one of the founders of the program that created remote viewing as we know it in the 1970s at Stanford Research International together with Hal Puthoff. And Ingo was one of their first subjects they were able to work with and experiment with to see if this was for real. Well, what Russell told us was, in the middle of his talk, and I don't think he'll mind me telling you this, in the middle of his talk he stopped and said, okay everybody, I want everyone to listen up. Remote viewing has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. The reason it works is because you're a large being, I'm paraphrasing here, you're a large being who transcends space and time, and that's why all of reality is perceptible by you. Just paraphrasing what he said. And so some of the previous speakers at the conference had suggested to us that the reason things like remote viewing work, I like to think of it as a type of resonance rather than remoteness. The reason it worked was because it had to do with quantum entanglement, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, some sort of non-local interaction between quantum entangled particles. It's a very hot subject in science these days because of the possible applications. Well, here's what Ingo had to say about that. And this is as far as I can remember exactly what he said. Russell's right. And he turned away and said, but not entirely. And so I was wondering what he meant by that. Not entirely in what way? Well, he went on to tell me his ideas about what he thought was going on here. And what he said was he believed our natural psychic abilities, if you'd like to call it that, for lack of a better word, because it's not really paranormal anything, it's something that's built into us. This is something that Ingo mentioned many times at the conferences when he spoke at IRVA and so forth, that we all possess a large amount of genetic material that science hasn't explained yet exactly what it does. If you've kept up with any of the literature recently about it, we now know that our genome, only a tiny percent of it is responsible for creating and replicating proteins that make up our cells, that make up our bodies, and so forth. Maybe about 2%, according to the latest estimates. And so science really doesn't know what the rest of it really does. We know that a certain percentage of that remaining 98% is considered regulatory DNA, involved in signaling communication between cells and so forth. But there's still a large part of it that's referred to as the so-called junk DNA. And I believe what Ingo was suggesting here is that that so-called junk DNA is actually acting like a radio transmitter, or a transceiver, if you will. That our DNA has a informational component to it that allows us to receive extra-dimensional, interdimensional information, non-local information, and so forth. In effect, that our DNA acts like an antenna. If you do a quick search about this yourself online, you'll see that there have been some articles about this, most recently in Wired magazine a few years ago, suggesting the possibility from experiments that have been done that DNA seems to exhibit certain properties that even if the organism is not living anymore, there's some radio signals there near the genetic material that can't be explained any other way. And if you think about it, the DNA has a helical spiral shape to it that is reminiscent of an antenna structure and so forth. So that's something to think about. And if you're someone who knows about this, feel free to contact me to share some of this information. But that's literally what he said to me. I wasn't able to go into more detail with him about it at the time because I thought we would be meeting again. He asked me to come back and so forth, and those other meetings never happened because he passed over before we could do that, sadly. But anyway, those were his ideas about why we're capable of doing remote viewing. I just think it's something to think about, and if we find out in upcoming years that there is really an informational component to DNA beyond our bodies, that's really one of its functions beyond what we think it is now, it'll be quite interesting to see that he was one of the people that was onto this very early. So anyway, I really thought I'd share that with you. Look forward to your comments as usual. Thanks a lot for paying attention, being a subscriber here, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care for now, and bye.